that was bad. That was really bad. Just give a review. Just give a summary. Just, you know what? If you really just want a clear-cut version, just go to Goodreads. They have everything. Why are you even here? Goodreads has everything. Anyways.
We went into aggressive negotiations. Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Spooky Monster, and today I'm going to be giving a non-spoiler book review for The Fatal Alliance by Sean Williams. Now, The Fatal Alliance is the first published book in the Old Republic series, and I emphasized published because this series did the old Star Wars trick where they don't actually give us stuff in chronological order. But since all these books are standalones, it's totally okay to read them out of order. Now, as the series title suggests, the book series takes place in the Old Republic era, which is about 3,500 years before the rise of Darth Vader. Now, in this book, we follow a Jedi Padawan who has recently been deemed not ready to do the trials. We follow a young ex-trooper with a troubled past. We follow a Sith apprentice who is greatly under the thumb of her master and has a secret to her past, and we follow a spy who has recently been promoted and is way out of his league. All of them end up meeting, converging, however you want to call it, on Nal Hutta after Mandalorian starts asking questions, making people uncomfortable, and engaging in aggressive negotiations. And while they're all there on that foul, stench-ridden planet of the Hutts for the same reason, but at cross purposes, they all find something to fear, and it's not just how the Hutts look. Now, after reading a book, I really like to go on Goodreads and see what other people thought about the book, and I was surprised by how many people really hated this book. I mean, most of the comments were negative, and most of the positive comments weren't very long, didn't give much detail, just like, oh, really like this book, very engaging, fun read, thumbs up here and there. And the people who really didn't like the books, quite a few of them had very valid complaints. And then others were not valid in the slightest, didn't even make any sense if they'd actually paid attention to what they were reading, and it made my underdog senses tingling. No pun intended. And so I'm going to have another video, which is going to come out an undisclosed time after this one, where I do a very spoily review for this book in which I address some of those problems people have with this book and why they're invalid, and then I'll give some of my own problems. But in this video, I'm going to focus on my likes and dislikes of this book without telling you guys anything too deep. Now, I guess we'll go ahead and start with the cover. I'm pretty sure the guy on the cover is supposed to be Doug Craigus, and if I'm saying his name wrong, I apologize. They say pictures speak louder than words. And in this case, it is definitely true because he looks a lot more dangerous and menacing than how he kind of came across in the book. I'm not saying he didn't do bad things. I'm not saying he didn't kill. But I'm saying he just looks so much more formal than the words painted the picture of him in my mind. And he never got that close to lava. Like, there was lava in this book, but that background makes you think he's on like Mustafar or something. He's not. He's not. But I must say that the beginning of the book was pretty slow, pretty hard to connect with. Like, there was a few chapters, right? And it was going, and then it lagged. It just kind of like lagged a little bit for me. The pace was a little bit slower than I would have liked. But again, that's a personal opinion. Now, for the most part, the writing style in this book was very easy to read, very clear cut. I'd give it to a middle schooler and they'd be like, yep, I understand this. We get the perspectives of like mainly 4 characters, but every once in a while we get a perspective of some other character in the book. Oh, someone's coming up the driveway. Oh wait, never mind, I know who that is. Anyways, he made the characters overlap. So here's an example. There's a big battle and then somebody makes a wall fall down, right? And then other things happen. And then we get another perspective and it goes back to the wall falling, and then we see other things happen through their perspective. So it kind of like jumps back and then goes forward and then jumps back and then goes forward. I wasn't a big fan of that in the battles, but there were other times where it made a little bit more sense and I was totally on board with it. And some of the transitions from one perspective to another were a bit choppy. Like, there'd be a time jump and I'd have to go back and like, oh, okay, wait, they moved. Gotcha. So I would have liked it to be a little bit smoother, but that's pretty much a small critique. Speaking of fight scenes in this book, there weren't like a whole boatload of them, there wasn't too many, but the second one in this book went on for just way too long. Remember that overlapping I said the characters did? That's where it happened the most, and so often. So we get this person's perspective, and it goes on, and then this person's perspective that starts back here, and then goes on, and then which the next one starts back here and then goes on. It was just, oh my goodness, it lasted so long. Maybe it didn't actually last like physically long in the book. It's probably taking up way more pages in my mind than it is in the book, but it felt like it just, ugh. And there were multiple points in that battle where I felt like the parts were just there to be a battle instead of actually learning something new about what they were fighting or what they were thinking. It was just there to add, in a cinematic version, explosions in the background that really did nothing. But in this book we mainly follow the Jedi Padawan, Shigar, pretend I'm saying his name right, Lauren, the ex-trooper, Eula, which is how the internet told me to pronounce it, even though throughout the whole book I was pronouncing it Ulla, but Eula, the spy, and Eldon Axe, which is the Sith apprentice. Now, out of those four, I enjoyed reading the perspective of the Sith apprentice Axe way more than all the others. I found her very intriguing, even though kind of like repetitive at times. She was definitely repetitive, harped on a few things multiple times, but I found her really interesting. She was very cold-hearted at times, and I'm like, how could you be that way? Let me read more about you, you know? So she was interesting, and I also liked Lauren and Ula. I'd say out of the four of them, obviously my least favorite is the Jedi Padawan. I liked him at the beginning, like I really liked him. And then throughout the book, I liked him less and less and less, and started liking other characters more. But, you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. A lot of people in the comments at Goodreads were saying that the characters were two-dimensional, they were flat, they didn't have much of an arc. Yes and no. You see, there's a lot of characters in this pretty short book. I mean, the book's only like... Boy, how long are you? Okay, so the book's only 417 characters. 417 characters, gosh, what am I reading? So as I was saying, this book is only 417 pages, so they had to cram a lot of characters, you know, traveling the galaxy, having huge battles, interacting with one another, growing, the opposite of growing, decaying? Technically some people did decay, but that's not the point. The point is that if some of them had small arcs, or no arc, you know, not everyone grows. People did have arcs in this book, but they were way more realistic. The bad guy in the book doesn't suddenly become, oh wow, I was a mass murderer and I hated the world and the people and I just wanted to murder everybody, but now I love everybody and everything's puppies and rainbows and I just want to be like a vigilante and help the little guy. Like that, no, not everyone has like a stark contrast like that. It's okay if the characters, they just learn something about themselves or the world as a whole and they change their perspective and they grow as a person a little bit. What's wrong with that? That is fine. That's a perfectly realistic arc for a character. And there were a few characters in there who had an arc like that in which they grew, they learned, and they're like, what I was doing, while technically it wasn't like a bad thing, I amend my thoughts on it. I think a little differently now, and I'm going to act accordingly. And my priorities have changed, and I've learned to like people that I hated before, or something like that. Not trying to give any spoilers away. So, I am totally on board with small arcs. Do I like big arcs? Of course I do. Everyone loves to see that one character who completely changes. I mean, for good reasons, of course. Or bad reasons, but I mean like, good build-up, like there's a reason for it. I don't like it when someone has an arc and it's like, how or why did you change? Psychologically, that makes no sense. But in here, I felt like the arcs made sense. Some people didn't have arcs at all, and that's fine, because they had an agenda at the beginning of the book, and they still had the same agenda at the end of the book. You know, some goals take a long time to achieve. So I feel like in certain characters that was a very unwarranted accusation, but in other characters there definitely was a flat arc, but for the most part I was fine with it. Now, another thing that I really liked about this book is it had a romantic subplot that stayed a subplot. I hate reading a book where it had a little romantic subplot in the background, but then ends up becoming like the whole narrative and just takes over the plot, and it's like every other chapter is just hyper focused on that love subplot, and it's just like, no, leave it in the background where it's supposed to be. And I really like that because I don't like reading romance books, but I am totally fine and on board with it being in the background or kind of like on characters' minds, and they're thinking about it and it's something that develops over time. But I will say there is a case of insta-love in here, and I'm not on board with that. I don't like insta-love, but as far as insta-loves go, it wasn't like a weird one. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like overly done, like, oh, I see this person and I know they're my soulmate, so I'm gonna stalk them creepily. Like, it wasn't anything weird, okay?
Stalk them creepily.
Now, a lot of people were also complaining about the dialogue in this book, how it was corny, it was cheesy, no one actually talks like that. And I agree, there were a few moments where the dialogue felt like just, what? Why'd you say that? But, you know, you may recall in your own life, sometimes people say things and it's like, why'd you say that? That just doesn't make any sense. There were a few cringeworthy moments in this book. I would say about 3 that other people might cringe at. I know I only really cringed at one part, but it was kind of meant to be a cringe part. You know, it was specifically written to make you feel just like, oh, why? No. I don't know if all those cringe moments were intentional, but I know one definitely was. And I do want to say something about Ula's character. People in the comments complain. I said Ula. It's Eula. Eula. Gotcha. People on the comments of Goodreads complained about Eula's character a lot, which is weird because he was definitely one of my favorites. I didn't like him as much at first, but then he grew on me more and more because he was just so bland. He was likable. He was just so average. He was likable. He had normal internal struggles that he deals with from the beginning all the way up until almost the end. And it's like, it's such a small struggle, but it ends up being a huge deal. And watching him trying to tackle that in the most mundane thought processes ever, I found really entertaining. So yeah, he was definitely one of my favorite characters, besides for Axe, who was, I don't know, I could never like pin her down, because in one moment she's being completely heartless, you know, Sith, and the next moment she has a thought that isn't like completely awful, or it's even like funny, and it's like, girl, I know evil characters can be funny and stuff like that, but like the difference, there's a contrast. It was like a happy kind of funny, and it was like her being sarcastic about her own situation, and her just kind of like one moment just being completely and utterly hateful towards the galaxy and hating everybody and being in a cold murderous rage, and then later being like, oh, you know what, I respect that person. So on the subject of characters, people were saying the characters were stereotypical and it's like, oh, a Padawan who has a problem with the Jedi Order. They were trying to compare the Jedi in this book to Anakin, which doesn't make any sense. All the kid did was question the Council's decision. Anakin questioned everything, including his own thoughts. The kid, he was more like, in this book, The Apprentice, he was more like embarrassed than angry. So they feel like just because a Jedi questions the Order and their decision or what they do or how they're handling things, that they're automatically a stereotypical character because that's what Anakin did. He questioned things. And it's like, multiple people can question things without being the same character. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And smugglers can be obnoxious and annoying and kind of like rugged charmy without being a Han Solo. Okay, did this guy make me think a little bit of Han Solo? Yeah, but I think he was just a twinge bit smarter than Han Solo. Just gonna say that. I'm not trying to diss on Han Solo, but he wasn't the sharpest of sharp knives in the drawer. I'm just saying this guy was a little bit of a sharper knife. Now, I think out of all the complaints that were in the comments, the most valid of those complaints was the fact that this book did not feel like it took place in the Old Republic era. The only thing that lets you know that this was in the past is that the Sith have their own little empire. They have their own system with, you know, the head Sith and then masters and their apprentice under them and then the emperor at the top. Like, they had their own system. There wasn't just two. There was a lot of them and they were organized mainly. So that's literally the only thing. I'm trying to think of something else that made me realize it was old. I mean, obviously, besides for not having more modern Jedi mentioned, you felt like this could have taken place in Anakin's time. Not much of a difference, especially since there is technology in here that is way more advanced than we see in later books. Now, obviously, there's a reason for that in this book. It definitely did not help with the whole time perspective. Since this is being touted as like an Old Republic book, I expected it to be more immersed in that time and more specifically made to represent that time. So I was a little disappointed. Okay, I say a little, but I was actually really disappointed. I hope the other books in the Old Republic series deal with this better. I hope I get a better overview of what it was like in the Old Republic era, because I want to see more of it that isn't very just stereotyped Star Wars and Anakin's time. Now, overall, was this the best Star Wars book I've ever read? No. No, it was not. Definitely not. But was it the worst I've ever read? No. Definitely not. I give this book 3 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend you to read this, but keep in mind while you read this that this is kind of more of a plot-based book than it is a character-based book. It's not focusing on much as the characters since there are so many of them, even though I personally feel like some of the characters are very much likable. I feel like this character definitely needs like a novelette sequel to it so it can explain some things further, because in my mind there are some cliffhangers in this book that don't get addressed. But I'm going to address that in my next video. Maybe not next video. We'll see. We'll see what happens. In my next video for this book, which is going to be spoily, which I talk about the things that this book probably should have done better in my opinion, or could have done better, or should have addressed. And I talk about some of the things that people complain about this book that have no solid foundation to their claims at all. So until you see me in my next video, I want to tell you guys to stay safe, eat donuts, and please read some good books. Because, you know, this one wasn't half bad. Hey everybody! Hey. Now in this book, we follow the Glints. No. What am I doing with my life? I don't know. I'm just talking to a camera because I don't have anyone to talk to in real life. Because if I do, they'll just mansplain. Maybe I shouldn't talk about that. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. 20 nights in the ice is a long time. When there's hostiles on the hill, it's not about what you hear, it's all about who you are. Showing that silence, and my camera had stopped recording. Hi there. Was in the bathroom now listening to me. This is creepy. I was in the bathroom and I can almost hear them pee. Creepy. So, anyone who just questions the Jedi. Girl? Oh no. Oh no. I completely lost my train of thought. Oh! I got it. I felt so happy. I remembered what I was thinking. How amazing is that, right?